It's a Western, but modern day. Now, that might sound a little confusing, but just hear me out, okay? I love Westerns ever since I was a kid. Gunslinging and horseback riding and the beautiful desert sunset. Western movies are typically described as a story in the late 19th to early 20th century, portraying a cowboy or gunman riding a horse through the American West, according to Wikipedia, that is. They often emphasize the brutal wilderness, the beating sun, and take place miles from any big civilizations, surrounded by mountains and deserts. You kind of see the picture? Well, keep that picture, but let's change some things. Westerns have always been directed at the male audience, but I want to make one for women. And not just women either, for the LGBTQ community as well. I imagine a small gang of cowfolk, consisting ideally of a woman of North American descent, a woman of African descent, 2 Native American women, and a woman of Asian descent. And on top of it all, they all have an interest in women, sexually. In layman's terms, it's a Western gang of lesbians. This could be a television series, and I want it to be a television series. The first episode would be an introduction to our group, all 5 of them sitting in a saloon and having a good time. Now, this is a Western, so most, if not all, of the furniture is wooden. There's swinging barn doors, glass bottles, tin cups, but also neon-like signs on the wall, a pool table, and a dartboard. Why? Because this Western takes place in the 21st century. Anyway, all 5 of our folks are sitting in the saloon, and a man walks in. I'll let your imagination dress this man in your preferred Western attire. Maybe some boots, some spurs, a hat, a poncho if you're feeling rambunctious. And as he approaches the table, the whole saloon is silent. All eyes are on this man. You'd think there's going to be a confrontation. He'll pull out a gun and start shooting, or a bar fight's going to ensue. But this man, he puts his hands on the table, looks around, and goes, "Can you guys help me set up my internet?" And then everything's normal. I want this series to have the feel and the look of a Western, but always have these small, maybe big, reminders that this is in fact the 21st century. I want to set up scenes like the one how I kind of painted for you, to make you think that this is a Western, but it's not 100% a Western. It's like Mackinac Island, but dustier. There's no cars, there's tons of horses, but it's still in the times. As I said, the first episode will be an introduction to our group. We'll see them live their lives in this Western-esque town that I'd like to call Little Dirtmouth. Then we'd have an episode for each one of our characters with some background information and kind of their origin story on how they made their way into our town. For the most part, there's a common theme that all of them didn't feel welcome in their hometowns, or they didn't really feel welcome in their own families. Some had major conflicts that inspired them to finally leave their hometowns, and others it was more subtle. But they all seem to find their way into Little Dirtmouth. And in this town, that's where they kind of find the family that they didn't have before. Each one rolled into town like a tumbleweed at different points in their lives. And I do have some rough backstories figured out. I want to start with one of the Native American women. The elder of the 2, she left her tribe to challenge the forced assimilation of heterosexuality in the United States, because in her culture that is accepted. She founded Little Dirtmouth, and when our first character kind of wanders in, whoever we decide that be, she's just welcomed with these big open arms. Little Dirtmouth really lacks extreme politics that we see today and stereotypes, and has absolutely zero tolerance for discrimination. It's so far out in the middle of nowhere that this town seems like it's practically sheltered from hate and negativity with a magic force field, but it's not, at least not yet. The purpose of this series is to break stigma and stereotypes through a familiar type of media like a Western. I want the women to perform non-conventional tasks and have non-conventional jobs of typical women in Westerns, such as being a bartender or a bank manager, even a gun shop owner. I want these characters to feel real, and normalize LGBTQ relationships. I want them to sit down together and talk about their struggles with dating culture and everyday life. The young female characters will appeal to a younger female audience, but our oldest Native American character will act as a maternal figure to the rest of the characters and hopefully appeal to mother viewers. The Western theme will also hopefully attract a male audience, although I'd like to not portray our characters to appeal to the male gaze of media. One of the main goals of this series is that I want the audience to sit down and feel like they can relate to these characters. I want to show the audience that sometimes where you are right now isn't where you're meant to be forever. Which we'll show that a little bit, or hopefully show that in our background episodes. Sometimes when you leave the place that you're at right now, you find something better, and I want to show that. In Little Dirtmouth, our characters will grow and mature and find a place that they feel they belong. Some will stay and some will leave throughout the course of this series, but they'll always have a place to call home. I like to think that family isn't always blood, but it's who you will bleed for.